Ladies and gentlemen, when we talk about what a woman secretly misses after a relationship ends, we must first understand that human memory, especially emotional memory, is not linear, nor is it entirely rational. It's deeply embedded within the unconscious structure of the psyche. She might not articulate it directly, she might not even be fully aware of it, but what lingers in her mind isn't just the events of the relationship, it's the emotional texture of those moments, especially the ones that shaped her perception of safety, identity, and meaning within that relationship. There is an ancient psychological truth that we often forget. Emotions are not just responses to stimuli, they are indicators of value. They tell us what mattered. And in the case of romantic attachment, the emotional imprints left behind often reflect not the grand, obvious gestures, but the small moments. How she felt when you entered the room, how her nervous system responded to your calm or your assertiveness, how the presence of your voice or touch could momentarily make the chaos of life feel manageable. These things seem subtle, almost insignificant, but psychologically, they are monumental. They form a kind of internal narrative that the mind continues to revisit, sometimes long after the relationship has ended. The female psyche, like the male's, is structured around certain evolutionary and social truths. One of these is the drive for emotional attunement and bonding. In a stable relationship, when a man shows consistency, reliability, and the capacity to carry emotional weight without collapsing, it creates a deep psychological anchor for a woman. Even when things go wrong, even if the relationship becomes dysfunctional or breaks apart, that anchor doesn't immediately vanish. There is a part of her that remembers not just you, but how her nervous system was regulated in your presence. That is how the structure you provided, whether through words, gestures, or the mere predictability of your behavior, allowed her to feel, even temporarily, that life made more sense. This is not just poetic or romantic thinking. It's grounded in neuropsychology. Our brain consolidates memory in the form of emotional significance. When something matters deeply, it becomes sticky. It stays. So, what she misses may not be fully accessible to her conscious thought. She might not sit around and list qualities or events, but a scent, a song, a phrase someone else uses, or even a certain type of silence can reactivate those emotional memories. And with that comes a longing not necessarily for you in your totality, but for the emotional state your presence once allowed her to access. It's also worth noting that this memory is often filtered through a lens of idealization. Once the chaos of a breakup settles, the mind begins to selectively recall moments that brought stability and comfort. These moments become elevated, almost mythologized. What she misses then isn't just something you did, but what that action symbolized. Maybe it was the way you fixed something in the house without being asked. To her, that might have symbolized protection, reliability, or competence. These are archetypal markers in the female subconscious, not just traits, but signals of order amidst chaos. And the absence of those signals can be jarring. After a relationship ends, the environment changes. New people enter, but they don't carry the same emotional pattern. They don't know her story. They haven't witnessed her breakdowns or celebrated her quiet victories. And most importantly, they haven't shaped the emotional equilibrium she once experienced with you. So, what she misses might not even be who you were in reality, but who she was in your presence, how she felt when she knew, perhaps for just a short time, that someone else was holding part of the weight of the world. To understand this is to understand that relationships are not just interpersonal contracts. They are co-created psychological realities. When they end, a part of that shared reality fractures, but the echo remains. And that echo, if it carried meaning, safety, or even challenge and growth, will not be easily silenced. Whether she admits it, recognizes it, or actively denies it, the deeper structures of memory are still at work. And they whisper not in words, but in feelings, often quiet, often conflicted, but undeniably real. To understand what she secretly misses about you, we must step into a deeper psychological framework, one that views relationships not as mere emotional exchanges, but as structured systems of meaning. In this framework, your role wasn't just about affection, entertainment, or companionship. It was about the frame you created, your ability to offer order, direction, and stability in a world that is otherwise filled with uncertainty. This concept of the masculine as a container of chaos, as a stabilizing force, is as old as human civilization itself, and when it's gone, it's not just your absence that is felt. It's the collapse of that frame. The masculine, when functioning properly in a relationship, plays the role of structure. This isn't about dominance or control in the crude sense, but about bearing responsibilities, ecological, emotional, and even spiritual responsibility. It's about having a center from which decisions emerge, a sense of purpose that informs action, and a commitment to something higher than mere personal pleasure. When a man brings that into a relationship, consciously or unconsciously, it provides a sense of grounding. For many women, this grounding becomes a reference point, a kind of emotional compass. She might not be consciously aware of it, but it guides her sense of safety, orientation, and relational coherence. What she often misses, then, is not just the physical presence or daily routine. It's the invisible structure you created through your demeanor, your habits, your values, and the way you handled pressure. When a man consistently acts with integrity, when he shows that his words align with his actions, he becomes predictable in the most valuable sense of the word. That predictability is not boring, it's reassuring. It allows her nervous system to relax. It permits the emergence of emotional vulnerability, and once that structure is gone, there's a kind of disorder left behind, even if she was the one who chose to leave. Human beings crave order, not rigid control, but meaningful coherence. We seek it in narratives, in rituals, and in relationships. And for many women, the presence of a grounded man provides that coherence in real time. He sets the tone for emotional regulation in the relationship. If he remains calm during conflict, if he responds to stress with strength rather than collapse, if he demonstrates resilience without cold detachment, she senses it. It creates a container for the chaos of life, and she learns, perhaps without ever vocalizing it, that she can rest there, at least momentarily, and here lies the paradox. What she misses might not have been obvious to either of you at the time. It's not just about emotional expression or affection, although those matter. It's about your frame, the values you lived by, the decisions you made under pressure, the stability you represented when everything else seemed unstable. If you had a vision for your life, a sense of direction, and you pursued it with conviction that left an impression, it created a psychological standard. And after you, she may begin to notice that others don't measure up, not because they're not nice or kind, but because they lack the gravitas that your structure provided. It's also important to note that this longing doesn't necessarily mean she wants to return. Nostalgia doesn't always lead to reunion, but it does indicate that something meaningful was present, something more substantial than surface-level compatibility. When a woman remembers a man for the order he brought into her life, it means he touched something deep in her psychological architecture. He provided a kind of map. A sense of this is how things can be when someone is grounded and intentional, and that memory once formed tends to linger. She may encounter others, some more emotionally expressive, some more materially successful, but they may lack that internal discipline, that presence that comes from knowing who you are and what you stand for. And this is often what she subconsciously misses. Not a list of behaviors, but a way of being, a relational structure that allowed her to relax into her own emotional depths without fear of being unheld or unseen. In essence, what she secretly misses is the container, the emotional, moral, and psychological frame that your presence constructed. It's not something she'll easily find again, especially if what you offered was rooted in integrity, strength, and purpose. Because that kind of structure is not just rare, it's foundational. And when it's gone, its absence is felt in everything that follows. When we explore what a woman might secretly miss after a relationship ends, we often assume it's the comfort, the familiarity, or the shared memories. While those elements are certainly part of the emotional residue, there's something deeper and far more psychologically complex at play. What she often misses is not simply who you were, but who you were becoming. It's the potential embedded in your growth, the trajectory your character was taking, and the shared future that was taking shape but never fully realized. This sense of lost potential, not just in you, but in the us that was never fully born, is a powerful and often unspoken source of longing. Human beings do not form attachments only to the present qualities of another person. We form attachments to their direction. We subconsciously assess whether someone is evolving, striving, becoming something more than they were. In a healthy dynamic, a woman watches a man grow, emotionally, intellectually, spiritually, and in that process, she begins to invest in a future version of him, not just the man she sees in front of her, but the man he is becoming through action, reflection, and challenge. That potential becomes a psychological contract, an emotional investment into the unfolding of a story that she, at one point, believed she would co-author. When the relationship ends, especially if it ends abruptly or prematurely, that story is cut short. The mind doesn't simply let go of that narrative. It holds on to it. It replays it. It mourns not just what was, but what could have been. And this mourning is far more complex than simple nostalgia. It involves the collapse of a projected identity, one that was tethered to your growth. She saw your flaws, yes, but she also saw what those flaws might become if transformed. She may have witnessed your struggle with discipline, with purpose, with emotional regulation. But in that struggle, she also witnessed your capacity to overcome. And it is that capacity, that potentiality, that often lingers in her memory long after the relationship ends. In many cases, what she secretly misses is the process of becoming that occurred within the relational container. Relationships, especially those rooted in emotional depth, act as crucibles for transformation. They challenge us to grow in ways we wouldn't on our own. You may have become more responsible, more introspective, more capable of navigating complexity while you were with her. And she may have become more open, more expressive, more attuned to her emotional needs. That mutual evolution creates a kind of psychological ecosystem, a shared developmental journey, and when that journey ends, what remains is a profound sense of interrupted transformation. This is not simply a romantic ideal. It has roots in psychological theory. Carl Jung spoke of the teleological nature of the psyche, the idea that we are oriented toward who we are meant to become. In a relationship, that future self is often co-constructed. Your growth impacts her growth. Your purpose adds structure to her emotional landscape. When you acted with vision, when you made sacrifices in pursuit of something higher, she didn't just observe that, she felt it. She was part of the unfolding narrative. And when that story is no longer being written, her mind continues to revisit it, asking, what if? Not just what if things had gone differently, but what if he had become who he was on the path to becoming? This, then, is what lingers in the emotional shadow. It's not always the memories of affection or shared laughter, though those are there too. It's the loss of potential that haunts the imagination. It's the feeling that something was becoming, that a structure, a future, a shared meaning was emerging, and now it's been dismantled before completion. She may move on. She may even find someone new. But that memory of who you could have been continues to exist as a kind of internal reference point. Others may match your traits, your skills, or even your kindness, but they may not match the depth of your developmental trajectory. They may not mirror the same internal evolution that she once bore witness to. So, what she misses is more than the person, it's the promise of growth, of becoming, of a shared life that was not yet realized. And because that promise was unique to the dynamic you had, it cannot simply be replaced. It existed within a specific emotional context, shaped by your presence, your vision, and your commitment to something greater than yourself. That absence is not always spoken aloud. It may not even be fully conscious, but it echoes, quietly, persistently, in the background of her emotional world, and that echo is often the clearest signal of what was truly meaningful. Not just the past, but the potential of the future you were building together, and which, for reasons sometimes beyond your control, was never allowed to fully unfold.